The early modern period of modern history follows the late Middle Ages of the post-classical era. Although the chronological limits of the period are open to debate, the time frame spans the period after the late portion of the post-classical age, known as the Middle Ages, through the beginning of the Age of Revolutions, and is variously demarcated by historians as beginning with the fall of Constantinople in 1453, with the Renaissance period, and with the Age of Discovery, and ending around the French Revolution in 1789. Historians in recent decades have argued that from a worldwide standpoint, the most important feature of the early modern period was its globalizing character. The period witnessed the exploration and colonization of the Americas and the rise of sustained contacts between previously isolated parts of the globe. The historical powers became involved in global trade, as the exchange of goods, plants, animals, and food crops extended to the Old World and the New World. The Columbian Exchange greatly affected the human environment. New economies and institutions emerged, becoming more sophisticated and globally articulated over the course of the early modern period. This process began in the medieval North Italian city-states, particularly Genoa, Venice, and Milan. The early modern period also included the rise of the dominance of the economic theory of mercantilism. The European colonization of the Americas, Asia, and Africa occurred during the 15th to 19th centuries, and spread Christianity around the world. The early modern trends in various regions of the world represented a shift away from medieval modes of organization, politically and economically. Feudalism declined in Europe, while the period also included the Protestant Reformation, the disastrous 30 Years' War, the Commercial Revolution, the European colonization of the Americas, and the Golden Age of piracy. By the 16th century, the economy under the Ming dynasty was stimulated by trade with the Portuguese, the Spanish, and the Dutch, while Japan engaged in the non-bun trade after the arrival of the first European Portuguese during the Azuchi Momoyama period. Other notable trends of the early modern period include the development of experimental science, accelerated travel due to improvements in mapping and ship design, increasingly rapid technological progress, secularized civic politics, and the emergence of nation-states. Historians typically date the end of the early modern period when the French Revolution of the 1790s began. The modern period, early modern timeline. Dates are approximate. Consult particular article for details. Early modern themes. Other East Asia. Chinese dynasties. In 16th century China, the Ming dynasty's economy was stimulated by maritime trade with the Portuguese, Spanish, and Dutch. China became involved in a new global trade of goods, plants, animals, and food crops. Trade with early modern Europe and Japan brought in massive amounts of silver, which then replaced copper and paper banknotes as the common medium of exchange in China. During the last decades of the Ming, the flow of silver into China was greatly diminished, thereby undermining state revenues and the entire Chinese economy. This damage to the economy was compounded by the effects on agriculture of the incipient Little Ice Age, natural calamities, crop failure, and sudden epidemics. The ensuing breakdown of authority and people's livelihoods allowed rebel leaders such as Li Zicheng to challenge Ming authority. The Ming dynasty fell around 1644 to the Qing dynasty, which was the last ruling dynasty of China, ruling from 1644 to 1912. During its reign, the Qing dynasty became highly integrated with Chinese culture. Japanese shogunates. Following contact with the Portuguese on Tanegashima Island 1543, the Japanese adopted several of the technologies and cultural practices of the visitors, whether in the military area, religion, decorative art, language and culinary. The Portuguese introduced tempura and valuable refined sugar. The Azuchi Momoyama period saw the political unification that preceded the establishment of the Tokugawa shogunate. Although a start date of 1573 is often given, in more broad terms, this period begins with Oda Nobunaga's entry into Kyoto in 1568, when he led his army to the imperial capital in order to install Ashikaga Yoshiaki as the 15th, and ultimately final, shogun of the Ashikaga shogunate, and lasts until the coming to power of Tokugawa Ieyasu after his victory over supporters of the Toyotomi clan at the Battle of Sekigahara in 1600. The Edo period from 1600 to 1868 characterized early modern Japan. The Tokugawa shogunate was a feudal regime of Japan established by Tokugawa Ieyasu and ruled by the shoguns of the Tokugawa family. This period gets its name from the capital city, Edo, now called Tokyo. The Tokugawa shogunate ruled from Edo Castle from 1603 until 1868, when it was abolished during the Meiji Restoration in the late Edo period. Korean dynasty in 1392, General Yi Seong-gye established the Joseon dynasty with a largely bloodless coup. Joseon experienced advances in science and culture. King Sejong the Great promulgated Hangul, the Korean alphabet. The period saw various other cultural and technological advances as well as the dominance of Neo-Confucianism over the entirety of Korea. During the late 16th and early 17th centuries, invasions by the neighboring Japanese and Qing Chinese nearly overran the Korean peninsula. After invasions from Manchuria, Joseon experienced a nearly 200-year period of peace. However, whatever power the kingdom recovered during its isolation further waned as the 18th century came to a close, and faced with internal strife, power struggles, international pressure and rebellions at home, the Joseon dynasty declined rapidly in the late 19th century. Indian empires and Southeast Asia. Mughal Empire on the Indian subcontinent. The Lodi dynasty ruled over the Delhi Sultanate during its last phase. The dynasty founded by Balal Lodi ruled from 1451 to 1526. The dynasty's last ruler, Ibrahima Lodi, was defeated and killed by Babur in the First Battle of Panipat. The Vijayanagara Empire was based in the Deccan Plateau, although its power was diminished after a major military defeat in 1565 by the Deccan Sultanates. The empire is named after its capital city of Vijayanagara. The rise of the Great Mughal Empire is usually dated from 1526, around the end of the Middle Ages. The Mughal Empire was an Islamic Persianate imperial power that ruled most of the area as Hindustan by the late 17th and early 18th centuries. The empire dominated South and Southwestern Asia. The Mughal culture displayed an orderly government, economic prosperity and religious tolerance, and achievements in the arts in architecture, miniature painting, and literature. Archipelagic empires. At the start of the modern era, the spice route between India and China crossed Majapahit, an archipelagic empire based on the island of Java. It was the last of the major Hindu empires of maritime Southeast Asia and is considered one of the greatest states in Indonesian history. Its influence extended to states in Sumatra, the Malay Peninsula, Borneo and eastern Indonesia, though the effectiveness of the influence is the subject of debate. Majapahit found itself unable to control the rising power of the Sultanate of Malacca, which grew to stretch from Muslim Malay settlements of Bukit Satol, Pantini bordering Ayutthaya Kingdom of Siam in the north to Sumatra in the southwest. The Portuguese invaded its capital in 1511 and in 1528 the Sultanate of Johor was established by a Malaccan prince to succeed Malacca, Africa and the Near East. The Ottoman Empire. During the early modern era, the Ottoman state enjoyed an expansion and consolidation of power, leading to a Pax Ottomana. This was perhaps the golden age of the Ottoman Empire. The Ottomans expanded southwest into North Africa while battling with the re-emergent Persian Shia Safavid Empire to the east, north and northeast Africa. In the Saracen sphere, the Ottomans seized Egypt in 1517 and established the regencies of Algeria, Tunisia, and Tripoli, Morocco remaining an independent Arabized Berber state under the Sharifan dynasty. In the Ethiopian highlands, the Solomonic dynasty established itself in the 13th century. Claiming direct descent from the old Aksumite royal house, the Solomonic ruled the region well into modern history. In the 16th century, Shewa and the rest of Abyssinia were conquered by the forces of Ahmed Guri of the Adil Sultanate to the northwest. The conquest of the area by the Oromo ended in the contraction of both Adil and Abyssinia, changing regional dynamics for centuries to come. The Ajuran Empire, which was one of the largest and strongest empires in the Horn of Africa, began to decline in the 17th century, and several powerful successor states came to prominence. The Geledi Sultanate, established by Ibrahim Adia, was a notable successor of the Ajuran Sultanate. The Sultanate reached its apex under the successive reigns of Sultan Yusuf Muhammad Ibrahim, who successfully consolidated Geledi power during the Badera Wars, and Sultan Ahmed Yusuf, who forced regional powers such as the Omani Empire to pay tribute. The Majeerteen Sultanate was a Somali Sultanate in the Horn of Africa, ruled by King Osman Mahamoud. During its golden age, it controlled much of northern and central Somalia in the 19th and early 20th centuries. The polity had all of the organs of an integrated modern state and maintained a robust trading network. Along with the Sultanate of Hobyo ruled by Sultan Yusuf Ali Khanadid, the Majeerteen Sultanate was eventually annexed into Italian Somaliland in the early 20th century. Following the military campaign of the Sultanates, Sub-Saharan Africa, the Songhai Empire took control of the trans-Saharan trade at the beginning of the modern era. It seized Timbuktu in 1468 and Jen in 1473, building the regime on trade revenues and the cooperation of Muslim merchants. The empire eventually made Islam the official religion, built mosques, and brought Muslim scholars to Gao. Around the beginning of the modern era, the Benin Empire was an independent trading power in West Africa, blocking the access of other inland nations to the coastal ports. Benin may have housed 100,000 inhabitants at its height, spreading over 25 square kilometers, enclosed by 3 concentric rings of earthworks. By the late 15th century, Benin was in contact with Portugal. At its apogee in the 16th and 17th centuries, Benin encompassed parts of southeastern Yorubaland and the western Igbo. Safavids. The Safavid Empire was a great Shia Persianate empire after the Islamic conquest of Persia and establishment of Islam, marking an important point in the history of Islam in the East. The Safavid dynasty was founded about 1501. For the base in Ardabil, the Safavids established control over all of Persia and reasserted the Iranian identity of the region, thus becoming the first native dynasty since the Sassanids to establish a unified Iranian state. Problematic for the Safavids was the powerful Ottoman Empire. The Ottomans, a Sunni dynasty, fought several campaigns against the Safavids. What fueled the growth of Safavid economy was its position between the burgeoning civilizations of Europe to its west and Islamic Central Asia to its east and north. The Silk Road, which led from Europe to East Asia, revived in the 16th century. Leaders also supported direct sea trade with Europe, particularly England and the Netherlands, which sought Persian carpet, silk, and textiles. Other exports were horses, goat hair, pearls, and an inedible bitter almond hadam torka used as a spice in India. The main imports were spice, textiles, metals, coffee, and sugar. Despite the demise in 1722, the Safavids left the mark by establishing and spreading Shia Islam in major parts of the Caucasus and West Asia. Uzbeks and Afghan Pashtuns in the 16th to early 18th centuries. Central Asia was under the rule of Uzbeks, and the far eastern portions were ruled by the local Pashtuns. Between the 15th and 16th centuries, various nomadic tribes arrived from the steppes, including the Kipchaks, Naimans, Kangals, Kungrats, and Manjits. These groups were led by Muhammad Shaybani, who was the Khan of the Uzbeks. The lineage of the Afghan Pashtuns stretches back to the Hotaki dynasty. Following Muslim, Arab and Turkic conquests, Pashtun Ghazis invaded and conquered much of northern India during the Lodi dynasty and Suri dynasty. Pashtun forces also invaded Persia, and the opposing forces were defeated in the Battle of Ghalnabad. The Pashtuns later formed the Durrani Empire.